right, we are live. Hello everyone. Give everyone a second to get settled. But I want to welcome everyone to our 17th live stream for the Empowerment Podium. Crazy how fast the numbers are moving up there. For those of you guys that are returning, welcome back. And for those that are new here, welcome. I'm so glad you guys are joining us today, and I really hope you'll stick around. You can join this community by subscribing to this channel, following us on Instagram and TikTok, and liking us on Facebook. The links to those socials are in the description down below. I'm so happy to be joined by today's speaker on such a fun topic. Today we're going to be using that Q&A format, so if you want to get in on that Q&A and you have a question for today's speaker, please feel free to submit any questions you have in the chat, and we'll try our best to get to those during our discussion. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to bring our speaker up alongside me. Awesome. Today we're joined by Nicole Rosania. Nicole is a fellow Bostonian who studied communication and international studies at Fairfield University. While an undergrad, she studied abroad twice in Italy and Australia. She recently moved to Charleston, South Carolina to pursue her MBA with a concentration in marketing, all while working on her travel blog on the side. Today, she will be sharing some of what she's learned from her travels, as well as some tips and tricks for solo female travelers. Welcome, Nicole.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us. So if you're good to go, let's just dive right on into the Q&A. It's clear that you've got a case of Wanderlust. I mean, I already said you studied abroad not once but twice in Australia and Italy, and now you're on a mission to visit all 50 states. And on top of this, you blog and podcast about your travel experiences. So how did you first discover your love of travel? Was there like a particular trip that unleashed your Wanderlust?
Great question, and I couldn't think of a better place to start because travel really is what has shaped my life so far, and there's obviously a pivotal point where all that commenced. And that point was actually on a high school trip with a company called EF, Education First. They're the largest international education organization in the world, and I traveled with them between my sophomore and junior years in high school to Italy on a 10-day trip. And this was the first big experience I had ever done without family or even close friends. So not only did it push me out of my comfort zone, but it really opened the doors to different cultures and what I'm capable of. I felt like this was a big period of growth for me and a lot of exploration. And you could say I caught the travel bug on this trip for sure. So doing this at such a young age, I was only 15 when I went overseas on this experience, piqued my interest in travel. I continued to travel with my family quite a bit. And then I did my first semester abroad in Florence, Italy. So I got to go back to Italy a few years later. And I actually did that as a sophomore in college. So again, doing it pretty young, which opened doors later on for me to study abroad for a second semester in Sydney, Australia. So to answer your question, I would say it was that high school trip that really piqued my interest and then kind of became my brand and like truly what I'm most passionate about while studying abroad. That's when I started my travel blog, which is the Abroad blog. I got this airplane tattoo on my wrist in Florence. I began networking anyone I could who worked in the travel industry, and I came home and I actually pursued an internship in the travel industry. So my experience abroad is definitely what has shaped my life so far.
Very cool. Yeah, I've heard about Education First EF, and it sounds like such an amazing organization. I've seen a lot of their trips that they offer for people of all ages, it seems, especially young travelers. So it's really sounds like a cool organization. So that's awesome that they kind of piqued your interest in travel.
Yeah, and they're based out of Boston too, so yeah, they're local.
Yeah, I love it. So in my experience, travel's like such a learning experience, you know, from the cultures to the food to the history. There's so much that you can absorb from that experience. So what's been some of the biggest takeaways from your travels?
Sure. So I would say that travel is the best form of experiential learning, which is my preferred way to learn. Probably all of us. Like we'd much rather walk through a museum or go look at a 500-year-old building versus just read about it in a textbook at a desk.
Agreed.
So I agree with you that travel in general is a learning experience for sure. I would say some biggest takeaways are of course, learning about history and like bringing those textbooks to life while walking around places such as Florence that are, hundreds of years old. But honestly, I've learned more about myself from travel than I have anything else. And we're going to get into this in a little bit when I talk about solo travel.
Mm-hmm.
But it really takes a certain type of person to feel comfortable traveling alone, or honestly just spending time alone with yourself. Like, we all spend time alone, maybe in our own homes, but it's really challenging for a lot of people to maybe like go out to dinner alone, or even just walking around their own city alone, never mind a foreign one. So I would say that my biggest takeaway from travel so far has been personal growth, and just realizing exactly who I am, what I like, what I don't like, what I'm comfortable with, what makes me nervous. And I've been able to apply all that into, my career path, my relationships, my friendships. So travel has really done a lot for me, more than any classroom therapist. Good.
I love that. Yeah, I think it's really cool how much you can learn about yourself when you're traveling. So I'm really excited when we kind of start to dive into solo trip discussions, because that's something that I've personally only done a handful of times, or found myself just wandering around on my own somewhere new. So kind of I kind of pivot into that now, but you've obviously said you've done a number of solo trips. And as you mentioned too, for many, the idea of traveling alone is just something they wouldn't even consider. So what's been some of the experiences you've had traveling solo, and do you think there's any specific benefits from those experiences?
The first experience I ever had traveling alone actually was during that semester abroad when I was in Florence. So I said I went as a sophomore. I went during the fall of my sophomore year, which is pretty young compared to most. I'd say most people study abroad as a junior. So I was actually only 19 when I was studying abroad. And I did most of my weekend trips with friends, because if any of you have ever studied abroad in Europe, or maybe know someone who has, there's, the typical weekends that people like to do, like maybe Paris or Oktoberfest. If you're studying in the fall, you go to Munich. So I was lucky enough where I actually had friends to travel with me, which was great, because again, I was only 19, so I was definitely a little intimidated, and I was in Europe. So it's a little different than just walking around Boston by myself, for example. But I remember towards the end of the semester, keep in mind I had already started my blog, I had my tattoo, I had begun networking. Also just gaining a lot more confidence in myself and my place in this world. I really had this urge to do a solo experience. I think I just wanted to push myself while I was still abroad, because abroad is kind of like a fantasy land. You feel like you're capable of all these amazing things.
True.
And then you
Very true.
come home and readjust to your real life. So I wanted to push myself and do something solo while I was still in Italy. I was not comfortable yet doing a full weekend trip. I did not want to go to another country. So I actually took a day trip to Lucca, Italy, which is about an hour west of Florence on the water.
Cool.
It's a beautiful little Tuscan town, and I felt very safe there. I also went on a Wednesday when I didn't have class, so there were really no tourists, just some locals. I remember I went in the morning too, so the light was beautiful. I could just kind of get lost in the streets, and that's exactly what I did. I didn't really want to use my phone that day. Obviously I told people I made it and I was safe. That's one of the tips that I'll share later. But I just really allowed myself to get lost, and because I didn't know anyone, I didn't really feel judged. I took myself out to a 3-course lunch.
Love it.
And I forced myself to not use my phone at all. Sometimes you feel awkward and you want to just get into your own little world, and I put it in my bag, and I just allowed myself to sit there and truly enjoy every single bite and just look around.
Yeah,
it's
people watching.
Such a sensory overload, honestly. So yes, that was kind of a long story, but that was my first experience ever traveling solo, and I highly recommend, if any of you are ever in a position where you could do something like this, even if it's just for a few hours. I was only in Lucca for honestly the morning and then lunch, and I went back to Florence later that afternoon. I definitely recommend it, because it will really open doors for you, and even if you hate it, you'll never have to do it again. You know what I mean? It's such a learning experience. I just recommend everyone tries it at least once.
100%. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with trying something. So I think that's awesome. And I love your kind of tip about just kind of putting the phone away, obviously, like checking in with people to make sure that you're safe. But I think you can really absorb a lot when you don't have like your face down in a screen. So I'm a big like fan of people watching and just kind of absorbing what's going on around you. So I think that's a really cool thing to do while you're traveling solo too.
Especially when you're alone, because never mind being so deep in your phone, but as much as I love people, and you're with someone else, you're usually talking to them and you don't even look around you and see what you're passing. So when you're alone, you really do take in everything. And like I used the expression earlier, it was a sensory overload, but it's such a different way to travel.
Yep.
And yeah, I just couldn't recommend it more. Obviously, I loved it from that little day trip, so I went on to do it a bit more during that second semester abroad in Australia. I actually did push myself to do a few weekend trips, not even on purpose. It was just places that I really wanted to go to and had budgeted for that other people in my program maybe just weren't interested in or would rather put their money towards something else.
Yep.
Now, Australia is so far from, Boston. I wasn't sure when or if I'd ever go back. So I was like, screw it. I'll just go alone.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad I did. So I did the Outback alone.
Wow.
With a tour.
Yeah.
So fully alone, that would not be safe.
Yeah.
But I didn't know anyone. And then I did Perth, Australia alone, Western Australia. And then I did Adelaide too, which is Southern Australia.
Wow.
And I went to Kangaroo Island. So I did three full weekends by myself.
That's incredible. Yeah, that's so cool. I think when I studied abroad in London, like I did like more small scale, just like, oh, I'm going to go see like this one site today or this one site today or whatever, try out a new neighborhood. But that's really cool that you just like went up and like flew to like the other part of Australia or like different areas all by yourself. That's awesome. Kind of piggybacking off of that, traveling solo can be a little overwhelming sometimes too if you're like planning it all yourself, you don't have anyone else to lean on. For example, like from a budget perspective, you can't really share accommodation costs with anyone, planning perspectives. So do you have any kind of general tips for anyone that's looking to get into solo travel and how best to kind of go about it?
Definitely. So you brought up a really good point that traveling solo has its pros and cons for sure. A major con is cost. You're right. It's not even the accommodation that gets me, because you could stay in like shared hostel dorm rooms.
True.
But like in Uber, for example, like when you can't split an Uber when normally you would be able to with up to 4 people, like that's hard. Even some meals are more pricey if you're just paying for yourself. So cost is definitely a con for sure. But to counter that, one of my tips is to stay in hostels, like I recommended. If you are staying in like a private hotel room, that could be several $100s a night.
Yeah.
So I always recommend a shared dorm room in a hostel. I personally feel more comfortable staying with all females. However, if you are open to a co-ed room, it's actually cheaper. I hate that it is, but it is dramatically cheaper if you're comfortable with it.
Yeah.
So I stay in female shared dorms, and everywhere that I've done this, which mostly has been around continental Europe and Australia, actually a little bit of Southeast Asia, it's very popular. If you were to do this in the United States, you might not even be able to find a hostel because it's just not as common here. But there's solo travelers, especially females, really all around the world. So don't feel super uncomfortable going into a hostel situation, especially if you're in a room with up to like 16 beds. I guarantee you half are probably solo travelers. So hostels are a great way to meet people.
That's very true. I stayed in like a couple when I was studying abroad, and it's definitely a unique kind of boarding situation, but it is an awesome opportunity to meet people from literally all over the world. So yeah, that's a good tip.
Do you want me to go into some safety tips now too, Kay, or do you want me to do that later on?
Sure, yeah, that's exactly where I was going next. There's obviously sometimes there's dangers that come with being alone. So yeah, I'm definitely curious to get into some of the safety side too.
Sure. So yeah, I already just shared like a social tip, stay in those shared rooms.
Yeah.
You can also find like shared shuttles that bring you to the airport that you could all just chip in. Maybe some strangers are also going where you need to go. That's a great option. If you are Ubering alone, I personally don't love to do that. So always make sure that you are really tracking where the Uber driver is going. I usually share my location with someone, either a few friends or even family members back home.
Yep.
So that right is a pretty prominent safety tip. Always make sure that you're sharing your itinerary. Just, at least a loose itinerary. Like, I plan on staying in this hostel for 2 nights. I'm going to go to X, Y, and Z place on Saturday, something like that. Just a loose itinerary. God forbid something happens, at least people kind of have eyes on you. So I definitely recommend that. And then the obvious that comes with the hostel is just make sure you lock up your belongings. You just never know who you're with. I actually usually bring my own lock, and then if you've never stayed in a hostel, a lot of the shared rooms have lockers. So you could just put your luggage right in a locker and lock it up. And then if you want your phone with you at night or something, I actually sleep with it under my pillow just because I like to be on it at night. And then when I go to bed, I kind of put it right next to me, and that way I know it's safe. So that's another tip for hostels right there. So share your location. I sound like a mom, but don't talk to strangers. If you kind of have a bad feeling about being somewhere where you're feeling uncomfortable talking to someone, you can always just excuse yourself. I actually pretend to get phone calls a decent amount, so this is a tip that I've used even in the United States. Anywhere really that you're from, is you could pretend to get a call and just be like, oh, hi, like, I see, like, you're right around the corner, like, I'll be there in a second, like, I'm coming, like, leave my spot for me. I do that all the time, or pretend to be on the phone with, like, your dad or someone. If you feel comfortable, that's actually a good method, so it doesn't really seem like you're alone.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, those are all super helpful tips. I mean, there's definitely, depending on what countries you're in, too, there's always, like, different scams and things kind of out there. So definitely using some of those tips to kind of get yourself out of anything that seems sketchy, that's great. Like, if it seems sketchy, it probably is sketchy. Like, that's generally how I live. So, yeah, I like that.
Obviously, try to just go out during the day. Like, when I'm traveling alone, I do not like being out at nighttime alone, to the point where I actually sometimes will do, like, takeout dinners, and just, I'm also a huge day person, so I have, like, packed days, and I'm traveling, lots of sightseeing.
Love it.
So at the end, I sometimes just get takeout, and we'll just bring it back to my hotel room, and I'm very content just locking the door and eating my dinner and staying in for the night. So I definitely wouldn't recommend really venturing out, too far at nighttime. And then, and then the last tip I have too is to do group tours. I know this kind of counters the whole idea of traveling solo, but traveling solo can be interpreted 2 ways, I think. One way is, like, truly being alone, like I was in Luca, getting lost in the streets, like taking it all in, self-discovery, kind of like an eat, pray, love moment. But other benefit of traveling solo is actually meeting new people. So it's not that you're going with, your parents or your best friend from home. It's that you're going alone, but putting yourself out there socially to meet people from all around the world. So I highly recommend doing group trips. So when I said that I was in the Outback in Australia, that was a group camping trip that I signed up for with 30 other people. So I may have been alone to the point where I was the only American on this tour.
Oh, wow.
But I was not alone in terms of numbers. So I felt very safe and met so many new friends, and I actually still talk to some of them today.
That's so cool.
Definitely encourage you to do that.
I love it. Yeah, that's really cool. Especially with, like, those tour companies, like even EF and stuff like that. A lot of those are, like, really geared towards solo people just coming together who all want to go to one place but don't have someone to go with. I think that those are all amazing options to kind of take up some solo travels. So, all right. So kind of starting to get towards the end here, but selfishly, as an avid traveler myself, I always want to add to my bucket list. So what have been some of your favorite places that you've been to?
Ooh, this is such a tough one.
I know.
Everyone's, if you've traveled a lot, like, you know how hard this question is because every place is so different. My least favorite question is people ask me to compare my semesters abroad. Like, which one do you like better?
Yeah, they're
different. So different. But to answer your question, one of my top favorite places in the world definitely has to be Ia and Santorini, Greece.
Oh, wow.
If you just close your eyes and picture white buildings with the turquoise-colored rooftops and the glass still ocean water in the background, That is
Beautiful.
Ia. It's spelled OIA, but it's pronounced Ia. And it truly is a dream. Like, yes, it's very touristy, but that's another place where you don't need your maps. You don't need to run around from site to site. You can truly just like navigate the little streets. And,
love it.
Yeah, I hope to go back.
Yeah, I want to go there.
Yeah, that's top. And then I would say Australia, just as a country, is definitely one of my favorite countries in the world.
Yeah.
My top favorite is the United States. My second is Australia, just because it's such a diverse place with so many different climates and things to do.
Yeah.
I was definitely my most adventurous self while living in Australia. I feel like that just kind of comes out of you while you're there. Like, you're going to be outdoors all the time. Australians are very happy, friendly people with incredible lifestyles. Like, everyone is so healthy, so you're going to be outside all the time, moving your body, eating good food. Obviously, Australia is not necessarily known for its food compared to places like India or Italy, but the food here really is so fresh and just healthful. So I would say that that is one of my favorite places I've been to, and I highly, highly recommend, if you can, start saving now, go to Australia, and make sure you go for at least a few weeks, because there's really a lot to do and you can't cram it in. Yeah. It's huge.
It's massive. Yeah, when I went, I only managed to hit Melbourne, Sydney, and then Cairns with like the Great Barrier Reef up there. Because we had like 2 weeks, so that was like perfect for the 2 weeks. But didn't get to, the other coast, didn't get to like New Zealand or anything. So I've got to save back up and go back because it was so beautiful. So
you did the highlights for sure. So good for you.
Yeah. Got to go back for the smaller things that not as many people go to, for sure. But all right, awesome. Well, before we close this out, do you just have any other closing thoughts for anyone who's listening, who's now inspired to travel more and hopefully travel solo more?
Sure. I would just like to end by talking about budget, which is a very realistic topic, because you may have been listening to this and hearing like, Florence, I've been all over Europe, and then I went to Australia, I've been all over Australia, and now I'm traveling all 50 states, and I'm also only 23, I'm a grad student. You might be wondering, how is this possible? And my big message that I like to share with everyone is, it really is attainable if you want it bad enough. You just need to be tight with your spending in other places. So, for example, I only had a few months, I had 1 year between my 2 semesters abroad. And I'll be honest, when I went to Florence, I built up my savings, and then I went and I drained it completely. Totally. And I had to really build it back up, also while being able to pay some bills and, contribute to my education in between. So I really cut down socially. Like, if I was going out and, I wouldn't order drinks in restaurants, I would have a drink before, saying no to dinners out, not shopping at all. Like, I did not spend really money on myself. I was painting my own nails. Like, it's the little things. I didn't have a gym membership. It was the summer, so I just would, go for walks or runs outside. And then I was working 2 jobs, too. So as a college student, I was definitely working more than 40 hours a week. So it was a hustle. And, like, don't get me wrong, I still had a social life. I'd see my friends a lot, but maybe do, like, sitting by a fire or going to the beach. Like, I tried to come up with fun, free activities. Right. It's my favorite phrase, fun and free. And I can tell you it's so worth it. Like, everyone has different priorities, but at this point in my life, I definitely prefer to spend my money on experiences, and that is still what I continue to save up for. So it's my tip. If you want it, you can definitely make it happen. Just put aside a tiny little bit a week, even if it's $20. It will add up. By the end of the month, you have almost 100 already, and that right there is multiple nights in a hostel. Like, that could probably last you 2 or 3 weeks. So
love it. No, that's a great tip. It's definitely about prioritizing. I'm definitely all about experiences right now too, so I'm right there with you. So that's a great tip for people to take away. All right. That, I believe, is all the questions that we have. So I believe that concludes our talk for today, but I just want to give another huge thank you to you, Nicole, for joining us today and sharing everything that you've learned from your travels. As someone who also loves traveling, I definitely feel inspired to start booking some more solo trips, so I hope some viewers feel the same way. Everyone, please go check out Nicole's blog and podcast. I've linked both of them down below in the description. They're amazing. She's amazing. So go give her some love as well. And thank you so much, Nicole.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
Of course. Now, before everyone runs, just a quick few shout outs. If you want to share your story, just like Nicole, let me know. Email us at empowermentpodium@gmail.com or message us on our socials. We have an Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok account, as I mentioned before, all of which you can search at Empowerment Podium to find, or I've included links down below. So give us a follow there. Stay up to date on when we'll be going live next, and to see some replays of our past stories. If you like this stream, please like this video, subscribe to this channel. You can also hit that notification bell to receive a notification every time we post a new video or live stream. And with that, thank you guys all again for tuning in, and we'll see you again soon for another story.